Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to your lesson of the day. Today you are going to take your note sheet and you are going to fill out your notes as you see on my paper in front of you. And the topic for today is algebraic terms. These are terms that are in an algebraic expression that are separated by either addition signs or subtraction signs. So for example, this big expression down here has four separate terms. The first term is 6y. The next term is this negative 2. Then we have a positive 8z, and we have a positive 4. So what we're going to be focusing on today is which terms are considered like terms. Like terms are terms that have the same variable raised to the same power. So I gave you some examples of like terms. For example, if I have 6x and negative 8x, they would be like terms because they have the same variable. The number in front can be different. Remember, that's called the coefficient, but the variables have to be the same. We would be able to combine these together because 6x plus negative 8x would make negative 2x's. So you can show that if you like. This is an example of like terms over here as well. We have two y squareds, okay, and we have another y squared over here. Maybe it's like some really big yo-yo. Yesterday we talked about how x's could represent items, so like x could be x-rays, and maybe y's are like super big yo-yos. So if you have two of them, we have one more next to it, and this would combine to make 3 of those super big yo-yos, or y squareds. At the end, we have r, so maybe this stands for 7 roses. And then this over here would stand for negative 1 rose. In other words, 1 rose died, you took it out of the bouquet. So 7 roses plus negative 1 rose leaves you with 6 roses. And again, this is just called combining like terms because in math we like to add terms together to create a simpler, shorter, neater algebraic expression that doesn't take up as much space. So that's the process that we're working on here. Now a couple things down at the bottom before we get going with some more examples. We need to remember that the sign in front of each term tells us if it's a positive or a negative. So for example, this right here is a positive 7y. Next to it you have a positive 5. And then you have a positive 6z. But as you can see, behind that you have this minus sign and this 8. Now guys, what we could do is we could do our keep, change. And then we could prove to ourselves that yes, that is a negative 8. And then we could do the same thing back here because we have another minus sign that we could do keep, change on. Some students like doing that, and then it is very clear that, yep, that's a negative 8 and that's a negative 3y. Other students prefer just to keep the negative sign and remember that that negative sign goes along with this number right here. So this would be a negative 8, this would be a negative 3y, and then this is positive. Now you might notice that I drew a 1 in there, and that's because when we have a coefficient that is single, we don't always draw the 1 in, but it's a good idea if you write in that invisible 1 so you don't forget. If there are any other z's, we're going to be combining it with the other z, and we want to make sure that we add that extra 1 to it. So I hope that you notice with this expression there is some like terms. We can take and we can simplify this to make it a little shorter. I think I'm going to start in alphabetical order though. Y comes before z. So I'm going to have you focus in on the 7y. And you guys can use your highlighter to do the same thing as what I'm doing. Because if you highlight those two terms that are considered like terms, remember they have the same variable raised to the same power, it means we can combine them. We can add them together. So we need to know 7y's plus negative 3y's. Think about it like yo-yos. 7 yo-yos plus negative 3 yo-yos is going to be 4 yo-yos. So it's always a good idea to combine them step by step and then record your answer down below. So we took care of the y's. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use our highlighter. I think we're going to move on to our z's. This time maybe I want to circle the z terms because that way that'll make them really stand out. So remember, this is a positive 6z. Could stand for zebras if you wanted to. So 6 zebras plus 1 more zebra would be 7 zebras, and it's positive. So you're going to hook that to your first term with a positive sign. And then guys, there's one more thing that we're going to focus on, and that is the fact that we have this plain number here. I'm going to put a box. I don't think that marker is going to show up, so I'm going to grab this one. Maybe I'll use this yellow one. If we put a box around that term and a box around that term, yeah, they're just plain numbers, okay, but they're still going to form part of the answer in my final answer because I can combine plain numbers with other plain numbers. So we just have to remember positive 5 plus negative 8 is a negative 3. Now one way you're allowed to show that is just with a plain old minus sign. The other way to show it is if you put plus negative 3 at the very end of the expression. Both of those are acceptable answers as far as combining like terms goes. So this one is acceptable, and we also said you could answer this one. There are 3 parts to our answer. One term there, one term there, and one term at the very end. It does take up less space than the original problem, so remember, that was the goal. Come up with simpler, shorter, neater expressions by adding together our like terms. On the bottom, we changed variables, so we now have m's, we have plain numbers, and we have n's. If you'll notice, we have quite a few positive terms, but we do have a couple negative terms here and here. So it wouldn't be a bad idea if you wanted to do some keep, change, so that we don't forget, this is a negative 3n and a negative 2m. Again, using your highlighters is a good idea to keep everything organized. M is the first letter that I come across in this problem, so I'm going to focus on combining just the M's together. Maybe M stands for monkeys again, or M&M's or something. I start out with 4, I add negative 2, and I end up with 2. And then again, I think I'll do some circling with my pink highlighter, and I'm going to focus on my N's this time. I don't know what N could stand for. Noses? I don't know. So negative 3 N's, noses, plus 6 N's, noses. Strange situation, but I think we'll go with it. Negative 3 plus 6, remember, is a positive 3 of those items. So that's why you're going to have a positive sign, a 3 and an N. And then finally, we're going to put a box around our constant terms. We have a positive 9. And we have a positive 7 to combine, and this gives us 16. So this time we looked out. All of our terms in our answer are positive. Again, you put the like terms together, and you often end up with an answer that is much shorter than the beginning answer, but it still might have 2 or 3 terms. So guys, we're going to start this side together to make sure you understand the vocabulary. First question over here says how many different terms are up there. Remember, terms are separated by either plus sign or minus sign. So that makes this a term, followed by this, so that's 2 terms. The variable is your letter, so that's the x. The coefficient is the number in front of our letter, so that's 16. And the constant term, remember we went over vocabulary the other day, is this plain number at the end. It never changes. Notice it is a minus sign 8, or if you do keep, change, it reminds us that it is a negative 8, which is your constant term. So guys, here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to pause the video in just a second, and I'd like you to try the rest of these problems on your own. There's some examples where you're combining, and there's another example where you're answering questions about the vocabulary we've been learning. So again, you're going to pause the video right now. You're going to work through those questions, and then what you can do is hit play to check your work. Make sure they're right before you tape them into your notebook. Go ahead and pause now. Okay, welcome back. Time to check your answers. For question 2, you should have said there are 3 separate terms that are being connected with the plus and minus signs. The variable, again, is x. The coefficient to the middle term, if you look carefully, your middle term is right here. The coefficient is the number stuck to your variable, so that's why I grabbed the negative 6. And the constant term is this plus 3 at the end of the expression. So now I wanted you to practice combining, and in this expression you can combine your variables together, but you can also combine your constant terms. So remember, you can use highlighting, you can use boxes and circles to help identify the things that should go together. So with this one, we also had some minus signs. So remember, you could do your keep, change to realize that's a negative 7. And you could also do your keep, change here to realize that's a negative 5x. So guys, this is how I got 1x by combining 6 x's plus negative 5x. And then I combined my plain numbers, my constants. So that's why I have negative 7 plus 1. One way to show that answer is having the 1x plus the negative 6. And if you want to make it a little bit simpler and shorter, notice that we'll drop the coefficient of 1 on x. We're also going to, instead of having a plus negative 6, remember we can just write that as a minus sign 6 and it has the same value. So again, this one's a little more popular when we write them down because it's shorter and takes up a little less space. Your next one, we have a 4a plus a 1a. And that, in this case, is the only thing you can combine. So remember, your lazy or your invisible 1 can go in, and that's how your 5a is combined. Your negative 3b and your negative 7 do not have any other terms that can go with it, so we do end up with a 3-part answer this time. And then for the last one, I highlighted my 8t, and I keep change, so I'd remember that that is a negative 1t. So that's how I got 7t's. And again, we can use our highlighter to also box in those constant terms. Negative 13 plus 9 should be negative 4. So this is one way to write it, 7t plus negative 4. Or if you want to shorten it a little more, it's the same thing as having 7t minus 4. All right, so guys, now what you need to do is you need to get out your scissors. You're going to go ahead and cut on the dotted line. You're going to place this in your notebook on the next set of pages. And if you have an assignment to finish, you should also be working on that next. Thanks for watching.